The small apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater in the corner. Dust motes floated lazily in the sunlight that came through the cracked window. In one corner of the room, a little girl was sitting on the worn carpet, her small hands carefully folding clothes that had just come from the laundry. Her mother, tired from a long night of cleaning offices and homes, moved slowly around the apartment, putting things in their place. Life was not easy for them. Money was always tight, and luxuries were few. But there was a warmth in the little home that spoke of love and care. The girl paused for a moment and looked out the window at the street below. Children were playing, laughing, chasing each other in ways that seemed so carefree. She pressed her forehead against the glass and watched them, her mind wandering. She longed to do something more than folding clothes and helping with chores. There was a rhythm in her heart that seemed to beat faster whenever she saw or heard music. Sometimes she could hear faint notes drifting from the music shop at the corner of the street, and she would close her eyes and imagine herself playing along, as if she belonged in that world of melody and sound. Her father had left when she was very young, and her mother had taken on every responsibility herself. The apartment smelled of soap and the faint scent of the floor polish she used every evening. She had learned early that life required hard work and patience, but she also learned to notice the small moments of beauty. The girl loved to hum quietly as she worked, creating tunes that seemed to come from nowhere. Sometimes her mother would pause in her own work and smile, hearing the soft, unexpected music. But other times, she would shake her head, worried that life was too hard for dreams. Music is beautiful, but we have to think about practical things first, her mother would say, her voice gentle but firm. The girl didn't let that stop her. She had discovered something magical at a friend's house once. A small, old keyboard tucked in the corner. She had hesitated at first, her fingers trembling as they touched the keys. Then a note rang out, and her heart seemed to lift. She had no lessons, no guide, just a feeling inside her that told her what to do. Slowly, she pressed more keys, experimenting with sounds, and soon she had created a small, simple melody. It was clumsy, imperfect, but it was hers, and she had felt alive in a way she never had before. After that day, she became obsessed with finding music wherever she could. She watched videos on a borrowed tablet at the library, listened to street performers, and paid attention to every song on the radio. Sometimes she would make small instruments herself, tapping on empty containers or plucking strings from an old guitar she found at a thrift store. Her little room became a space where she could escape the worries of the world outside, a place where she could practice, imagine, and dream. Her mother noticed the change in her daughter. There was a light in her eyes that had not been there before, a spark that could not be ignored. Yet, she worried about what people would say, about whether her daughter could really have a future in something so uncertain. She worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads and to make sure her daughter had what she needed, but money for music lessons or instruments was almost impossible. Sometimes she would quietly cry in the kitchen, thinking about how unfair life could be, yet she never let the girl see her sadness. One rainy afternoon, the girl found a small, broken piano sitting outside a closed shop. Its keys were chipped and some were missing, but she could not resist. She dragged it into the alley, ignoring the muddy water soaking her shoes. She pressed the keys gently, listening to the uneven tones, and imagined herself playing a beautiful song. For hours, she practiced in secret, using the uneven sounds to guide her imagination, creating tunes that were imperfect but full of emotion. It was her way of speaking, a voice that no one else could hear but her. At school, she was quiet and observant. Teachers noticed her intelligence and her deep thoughtfulness. She would sit in the back of the class, sketching little patterns on her notebook, her mind half on the lesson and half on the music she hoped to play that evening. Some classmates would whisper about her, calling her strange or different, but she didn't mind. She had discovered something inside her that was larger than the small apartment, larger than the daily chores, and she clung to it with everything she had. Sometimes, she would help her mother with cleaning jobs on weekends. She would carry buckets, sweep floors, and dust furniture, her small hands working hard. But even in those moments, her mind would wander to music. She would tap rhythms on the floor, whistle softly while dusting, or hum quietly as she polished a mirror. Her mother would watch her and sometimes shake her head, not in disapproval, but in wonder. There was something extraordinary in the way her daughter moved and thought, a sense of rhythm that seemed innate, almost magical. Her world was small, but it was full of discovery. One evening, as she was cleaning up after a long day, she heard the faint strains of a violin from the building across the street. She paused and pressed her ear to the window, mesmerized. The notes twisted and soared, and she could feel them echoing inside her chest. She wished she could touch the instrument, hold it in her hands, and let the music flow through her. In that moment, she promised herself silently that one day she would play like that she would find her own voice and make others feel the way she felt listening to that violin. The next day, she returned to the library to look for books on music. She borrowed every beginner's guide she could find, copying exercises into her notebook, practicing finger placements, and trying to understand the patterns and scales. Every spare moment was filled with sound, even if it was just tapping on the edge of a table or humming softly to herself. Her friends at school started to notice the small tunes she would hum in the playground, and though they didn't fully understand, some began to listen and smile. Even with all the practice and dedication, she faced moments of doubt. She would sometimes look around her small apartment, see the worn floors and peeling paint, and wonder if her dreams were too big for the life she had. But she always returned to the piano, to the small keyboard, to the songs that lived in her head. Music had become a refuge, a place where she could be free, where her imagination could roam beyond the constraints of her reality. Her mother, despite her worries, began to quietly encourage her. One evening, she brought home a small notebook and said, "Write down the songs you make. Keep them safe." The girl took it with trembling hands, feeling a sense of validation she had never known before. It was not much, but it was enough to make her feel that someone believed in her, that her talent mattered. She began writing down melodies, creating small compositions, and sharing them with her mother, who would listen quietly, sometimes nodding in approval, sometimes just smiling. Word of her talent began to spread slowly. Neighbors would hear her humming or tapping out rhythms, and some would pause to listen, impressed by the depth of emotion in her music. She was still just a child, working hard and living simply, but the seeds of something extraordinary were taking root. Every note she played, every melody she imagined, brought her closer to a world she had only dreamed of. She never let her circumstances define her. While others might have felt trapped by their struggles, she found a way to rise above them through her music. It was not about fame or recognition yet. It was about expression, about finding a voice in a world that often seemed too harsh. Each day, she worked, studied, and practiced, her small hands learning the language of music, her heart filled with hope and determination. The quiet apartment, the worn floors, the smell of soap and polish, all of it became part of her story, part of the rhythm she carried within her. And so, in that modest apartment, amidst dust and sunlight, chores and daily struggles, a young girl nurtured a gift that was hers alone. She did not know yet that one day, her music would reach the ears of legends, that the world would stop to listen. But in those early days, in the simple moments of life, she laid the foundation for something extraordinary. Every note, every hum, every melody she created was a small step toward a destiny that was quietly waiting for her. The story of her life had begun, and the first chapter was full of hope, perseverance, and the unshakable belief that music could change everything. After discovering the small, broken piano, the girl's life quietly began to change. Every day, she found a few moments to practice, hidden from the busy world around her. She would sit on the floor, her fingers pressing the uneven keys, and imagine herself performing for a large audience, her heart beating fast with excitement and nervousness. The piano's imperfect sounds did not matter. They were enough for her to explore melodies and learn the feeling of music flowing through her. She began keeping a notebook, writing down the tunes she created, the patterns she noticed, and even the mistakes she made. Sometimes the melodies were short, a few notes strung together, and sometimes they were longer, winding pieces that told little stories without words. She called them her secret songs, and they became a private world where she could escape. Every evening, after her mother returned from work and the apartment was quiet, she would practice until her fingers were sore and her eyes were heavy with fatigue. School days were still difficult. She carried the weight of chores, homework, and responsibilities, and her classmates often did not understand why she spent so much time with music. Yet, she did not let their whispers or laughter discourage her. Music was more than a hobby. It was a lifeline, a way to express emotions that words could not capture. She noticed things others missed: the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of rain against the roof, the gentle hum of a neighbor's guitar, and she tried to turn them into notes and chords. Her imagination was alive, and every small sound was a potential song waiting to be discovered. One day, the girl walked home from school and noticed a street musician playing a violin. The music was raw and full of emotion, and she stopped in her tracks. She watched the musician's hands moving swiftly across the strings, producing sounds that made her heart ache with longing. For the first time, she felt the intense desire to perform for someone else, to make others feel the emotions she felt when she played or listened to music. She stood there for a long time, soaking in every note, and when the musician finally finished, she clapped quietly, almost embarrassed by the tears in her eyes. The musician smiled at her and nodded, a small gesture that felt like recognition. That moment stayed with her, inspiring her to practice harder and dream bigger. Her mother noticed the growing intensity of her daughter's passion. One evening, she approached her while she was writing in her music notebook. "You spend so much time with these songs," she said softly. "I can see how much you love it. But are you sure this will help you in life?" The girl looked up, eyes bright with determination. "I have to try," she replied simply. "It's the only thing that makes me feel alive." Her mother hesitated but finally nodded, realizing that this part of her daughter could not be ignored. She began to quietly support her, making small sacrifices to help her daughter find moments and opportunities to explore music, even if it was just allowing her to practice longer each evening or borrowing books and materials whenever possible. At school, the girl began to find a few allies. A teacher noticed the careful way she wrote in her notebook and asked her to play a small piece during a music class. The girl hesitated at first, worried that her peers would laugh, but when she sat at the keyboard and began to play, the room fell silent. The teacher's eyes widened, and even some of the skeptical students paused to listen. The music was imperfect, yet full of emotion, and it spoke louder than any words could. That day, she realized that her passion could reach others, and that her talent had value beyond the walls of her small apartment. The girl began to dream of more. She imagined attending music classes, playing in concerts, and learning from skilled musicians. She wanted to perform in front of real audiences, not just in her imagination or the quiet corners of her home. But she also understood the obstacles. Money was tight, opportunities were rare, and she was just a child from a modest background. Instead of letting these challenges discourage her, she used them as fuel to work harder. Every day, she found new ways to practice, using her body, her surroundings, and the resources she could find. Even broken or secondhand instruments became tools for her creativity. One afternoon, she stumbled upon an old, abandoned music room in her neighborhood. The door was slightly open, and inside were a few neglected instruments covered in dust. Her eyes lit up, and she carefully opened the piano bench, discovering sheet music that had yellowed with age. She spent hours studying the notes, trying to understand the patterns and playing small sections. The room became her secret haven, a place where she could experiment without fear of judgment. The sound of the piano in that empty space echoed in ways that made her heart race, and for the first time, she felt a connection to a larger world of music beyond her apartment. News of her small performances in school and at home began to spread. Neighbors would occasionally stop to listen when they heard her playing through the apartment window. They were surprised to hear such talent coming from a young girl living in difficult circumstances. Some even offered advice or small gifts, like sheet music or old instruments, to encourage her. Every gesture, no matter how small, strengthened her resolve, and made her believe that her music could make a difference. Despite the encouragement, the girl still faced moments of self-doubt. She would sometimes compare herself to professional musicians she saw on television or online, wondering if she would ever reach that level. But she remembered the joy she felt when she played, the sense of freedom and expression that nothing else could give her. Those feelings reminded her that music was not only about skill or recognition. It was about connecting with emotions, telling stories without words, and sharing a part of herself with the world. She also began to explore other forms of music. She listened to classical pieces, folk songs, and modern tunes, trying to understand the differences and finding inspiration in each style. Her notebook filled with notes, ideas, and small compositions, creating a personal library of her thoughts and creativity. Sometimes she would stay up late into the night, experimenting with new rhythms and melodies, her fingers dancing across the keys, her mind imagining audiences clapping and nodding to her music. One day, a local music teacher visited her school for a special class. The girl's teacher suggested she show a few students' talents, and the girl was chosen. She felt nervous, her hands shaking as she approached the keyboard. When she began to play, the teacher watched closely, impressed by the depth and emotion in her music. The girl lost herself in the performance, unaware of the small audience watching her. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. It was the first time she had experienced the thrill of recognition, and it filled her with a mix of excitement and humility. She realized that her music had the power to move others, to create emotions and connections that were impossible to ignore. Her mother watched from the back, tears in her eyes. She had never seen her daughter so alive, so confident, and so connected to something bigger than herself. The pride she felt was immense, but so was the understanding that this journey was just beginning. She continued to support her daughter quietly, helping her find opportunities, encouraging her practice, and celebrating small victories. The bond between them grew stronger, tied together by music, love, and shared dreams. The girl's life was slowly changing, not because circumstances had improved, but because she had discovered something inside herself that could not be taken away. Her talent, determination, and imagination were her most valuable possessions, and she guarded them fiercely. Every note she played, every song she wrote, and every melody she imagined was a step toward a future she could only dream of. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and doubts, but she also knew that she had already overcome so much. Her journey had begun, and the world of music awaited her, full of possibilities and promise. By the time she was ready to leave school each day, her heart was filled with music, her mind buzzing with ideas, and her fingers aching from practice. She walked home through the crowded streets, carrying a small bag of belongings and a notebook filled with compositions. The sounds of the city became part of her music. The footsteps of people, the rumble of buses, the chatter of vendors, all weaving into the background of her imagination. She knew that one day, all these experiences, all these small moments, would shape her music in ways that were unique and powerful. Even in the quiet moments, when she sat alone in her apartment or at the abandoned music room, she felt a growing sense of purpose. Music was no longer just a hobby or a secret escape. It was becoming a calling. She dreamed of the day she could share her music with more people, of the day when her melodies could reach ears far beyond her neighborhood. She understood that her path would not be easy, but she was ready to work, ready to learn, and ready to embrace whatever challenges came her way. The small piano, the broken keys, and the quiet nights of practice had begun to shape her into something extraordinary. She was no longer just a girl with a love for music. She was becoming a musician, one note at a time. The day of the local music event finally arrived, and the girl's heart was pounding with excitement and nerves. She had been practicing for weeks, even sneaking a few extra minutes during lunch breaks at school to rehearse her favorite pieces. The small auditorium was buzzing with parents, teachers, and local musicians. The air smelled of polished wood, old carpet, and the faint scent of flowers left by someone who wanted the hall to feel special. Her mother had taken a day off from work, sitting quietly in the back row, her hands wringing nervously. The girl carried her small bag with the sheet music she had carefully prepared, along with a few notes she had written to remind herself of the rhythms and tempos. Her fingers felt heavy with anticipation, and she could feel her heart thumping in her chest. She had never performed in front of such a large group, and the thought made her stomach twist with butterflies. As she walked toward the stage, she glimpsed the judges' table at the front, where a few well-known local musicians were seated. Their expressions were serious, their eyes focused, and for a moment, she felt small and unsure. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, making the small piano shine under their glow. The audience hushed, and she could feel the quiet anticipation pressing down on her. She sat down on the bench, her fingers hovering above the keys. Her mind raced, remembering all the hours she had spent practicing, the nights she had stayed up, the small victories she had celebrated in secret. She closed her eyes for a brief second and let herself feel the music before even touching a note. When her fingers finally pressed the keys, the first sound was soft, delicate, and slightly uneven. She frowned, but quickly reminded herself that imperfections were part of the journey. The melody began to grow, notes flowing more confidently as she moved through the piece she had prepared. The music filled the room, winding through the audience, touching the walls, and lingering in the air. She could feel the energy shift, the tension easing, as the audience became absorbed in the sound. For a few minutes, nothing else existed but the music, and the feelings it carried. Her mind drifted to the small apartment where she had first discovered her love for music, to the broken piano, the notebooks filled with melodies, and the quiet moments when she had practiced in secret. Every hardship, every late night, and every tear she had shed seemed to converge into this one moment. Her fingers moved with a grace she didn't know she possessed, creating harmonies that were not just notes on a page, but expressions of her heart. The audience listened in stunned silence, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, completely caught up in the music. The judges, who had seen many talented performers before, were visibly moved. One leaned forward, eyebrows raised, eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe the skill and emotion coming from such a young girl. Another held her hands to her mouth, trying to contain a small gasp. They had expected competence, maybe even a bit of charm, but what they were witnessing went beyond technical skill. There was passion, storytelling, and authenticity in every note she played. Her music was not just a performance. It was a revelation. For a moment, she felt herself floating, as if she were no longer on the stage, but somewhere between reality and the music itself. She imagined herself playing in a grand concert hall, with people listening from far and wide. The thought gave her courage, and her playing became bolder, more confident. The uneven keys, the worn piano, the small mistakes she had feared, none of it mattered. The music was alive, and she was its voice. As she reached the final notes of her piece, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. The last sound lingered, hanging in the air, and then there was silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved or spoke. It was as if the world had paused to catch its breath. Then, slowly, the room erupted in applause. People were clapping, some cheering quietly, others leaning forward in admiration. Her mother's face shone with pride, tears streaming down her cheeks. She had never seen her daughter so alive, so filled with purpose, and so undeniably talented. The judges were the first to rise. They approached her after the performance, their expressions a mixture of awe and respect. One of them, a violinist known in the local community, bent down and whispered, "You have a gift that doesn't come often. Keep playing, and don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Another judge nodded, adding, "Your emotion carries through every note. That is something money and training can't buy. You have heart, and that is everything." The girl felt a mixture of disbelief and joy. She had practiced and dreamed, but she had never imagined this response. For the first time, she understood that her music could reach beyond the walls of her apartment, beyond the small world she had known. It could touch people, inspire them, and make them feel emotions they hadn't felt in years. The realization filled her with a sense of purpose and a determination she had never known before. After the event, she stayed behind to speak with a few of the musicians and teachers who had watched her. They offered advice, encouragement, and even suggestions for how she could continue to develop her talent. Some offered to let her practice in their studios. Others mentioned scholarships and classes that could help her grow. For the first time, she saw a path forward, a way to take her music beyond imagination and into the real world. Her mother hugged her tightly when they left the auditorium. "I knew you were special," she said softly, her voice breaking. "But I had no idea. I had no idea it would be like this." The girl hugged her back, feeling the warmth and love that had carried her through so many difficult days. She knew that this was just the beginning, that there would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them. Her music had given her confidence, and the recognition of her talent gave her a new strength. That night, she sat in her small apartment, notebook in hand, and wrote down everything she had felt during the performance. She recorded the emotions, the reactions, and the small details she wanted to remember. Every note she had played, every feeling that had moved through her, was now part of her story. She realized that music was not just about playing notes correctly. It was about connecting, expressing, and touching lives. She had done that today, and the thought filled her with joy and determination. Over the next few weeks, opportunities began to appear. Local musicians invited her to join workshops. Teachers offered free lessons, and the small community that had once been unaware of her talent now watched her with admiration. She was still the same girl with chores, schoolwork, and responsibilities, but her world had grown larger, filled with possibility and excitement. She began to see that talent combined with hard work and passion could create opportunities she had never imagined. Despite the attention and praise, she remained humble. She continued to help her mother, attend school, and manage her small life, but she did so with a new sense of purpose. Each evening, she practiced on her piano, experimenting with new melodies and techniques she had learned from the musicians who had offered guidance. The small apartment was no longer just a place of chores and survival. It was now a place of creativity, learning, and hope. The girl began to dream even bigger. She imagined performing in larger venues, learning from skilled musicians around the world, and sharing her music with countless people. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt, but she also knew that she had already overcome so much. Every day, every practice session, and every performance brought her closer to the dreams she had held onto for so long. Her story began to inspire others in the community. Children who had been shy or hesitant started exploring their own talents, encouraged by her example. Neighbors would stop her in the street to praise her performance, and her mother's pride was shared with everyone who had known the family for years. The girl's music had become more than personal expression. It was a symbol of perseverance, hope, and the beauty that can come from humble beginnings. Even as her recognition grew, she remained deeply connected to her roots. She remembered the broken piano, the small apartment, the long nights of practice, and the sacrifices her mother had made. These memories grounded her, reminding her of where she came from and why she played. Music had given her a voice, but it had also given her perspective, empathy, and gratitude. As she prepared for her next performance, she felt a mix of excitement and calm. She knew that every time she played, she was telling a story, not just with notes but with her heart. Her fingers moved with confidence, her mind focused, and her spirit full of the lessons she had learned along the way. She had discovered that talent alone was not enough. Determination, passion, and the willingness to keep moving forward were what truly made a musician great. The girl's journey was far from over, but in that moment, on that stage, she understood something powerful. She had crossed a threshold. The world had noticed her, and she had proven to herself that her dreams were valid, her music meaningful, and her talent real. The applause, the smiles, and the quiet admiration of the legends in the room were not just validation. They were a promise of the possibilities that lay ahead. And for the first time, she could see a future where her music would touch hearts far beyond the small. apartment where it had all begun. The recognition from the local music event had changed the girl's life in ways she had only imagined in her dreams. Musicians, teachers, and even neighbors now spoke of her with admiration and wonder. People began to come to her for advice on learning music, for guidance, or simply to hear her play. She was still young, but her talent and dedication had already begun to inspire those around her. It was a strange feeling for her, standing at the edge of something so big, yet feeling the same love and connection for the small apartment where her journey began. Her mother noticed the change more than anyone else. The pride in her eyes was clear, yet she also felt a sense of concern. She knew the world could be harsh, especially for someone so young. Fame, recognition, and attention could bring both opportunities and challenges. Still, she supported her daughter quietly, encouraging her to keep practicing, to remain humble, and to remember that music was not only about applause, but about heart and soul. The girl continued to spend hours with her piano, experimenting with new pieces and developing her own style. She was fascinated by the different emotions music could carry. Some melodies made people feel joy, others sadness, some calm, and others inspired. She wanted to learn all of it. One afternoon, a well-known pianist visited the neighborhood. Hearing about the girl, he decided to meet her. When he entered her small apartment, he paused, impressed by her focus and the depth of feeling in her music. He sat quietly, listening as she played a new composition she had been working on for weeks. By the time she finished, he was visibly moved. "You have something very rare," he said softly. "Not just skill, but a voice in your music that speaks to people. Keep working, and never stop listening to your heart." His words resonated deeply with her. They weren't just praise. They were a confirmation that she was on the right path. She felt a renewed determination, realizing that every note she played, every melody she imagined, was a step toward connecting with the world in a way she had never thought possible. In the following weeks, opportunities began to appear more frequently. Local music schools offered her scholarships, and musicians invited her to perform at community events. She learned to balance these invitations with school and chores, sometimes feeling overwhelmed but never discouraged. She remembered the long nights when she had practiced alone, the broken piano, and the small apartment where her mother worked tirelessly. Those memories grounded her, reminding her of the effort it took to reach this point. Her first major invitation was to perform at a city music festival. The thought of playing in front of a larger audience filled her with excitement and fear. She spent days preparing, practicing every piece until her fingers felt sore and her mind was focused. The day of the performance, she arrived early, observing the grand stage, the large audience seating, and the rows of cameras. It was a world far beyond what she had ever experienced. She felt small and anxious, but she reminded herself of the journey that had brought her here. The broken piano, the secret melodies, and the hours of practice in quiet corners. That gave her strength. When it was her turn, she stepped onto the stage with a deep breath. The lights were bright, the audience silent, and the moment heavy with anticipation. She sat at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. She began to play softly at first, letting the music flow naturally. As the melody grew, the audience leaned in, captivated by the emotion that poured from each note. She lost herself in the music, forgetting the cameras, the audience, and even her nerves. It was just her and the piano, sharing a story that only she could tell. The audience reaction was immediate and intense. Whispers of admiration traveled quickly through the hall. People were leaning forward, some closing their eyes, others smiling or holding back tears. She could feel the energy, the connection between her music and the emotions it evoked. Every note she played seemed to resonate not only in the room, but in the hearts of the listeners. By the end of her performance, the applause was thunderous. The city's most respected musicians and critics were on their feet, acknowledging the extraordinary talent of this young girl. The girl felt overwhelmed. She had never experienced anything like this before. Her heart raced, her hands trembled slightly, but she also felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had shared her music with the world, and the world had responded. Her mother was in the audience, tears streaming down her cheeks, proud beyond words. She had witnessed her daughter, the girl who had started with a small, broken piano, now commanding a stage and touching hearts. After the performance, several of the legends approached her. One violinist, who had been moved to tears, offered to mentor her, while a pianist suggested she consider formal lessons at a renowned music school. The girl listened carefully, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. She realized that her journey was no longer limited to her small apartment or neighborhood. She had opportunities, guidance, and the chance to grow in ways she had only dreamed of. Yet she also understood the responsibility that came with it, to remain humble, to continue practicing, and to never lose the essence of why she played music. In the weeks that followed, she began taking lessons with the mentors who had approached her. Each session was challenging, filled with exercises that tested her patience, focus, and skill. But she embraced it all, understanding that growth required dedication and persistence. She spent hours refining her technique, exploring new styles, and learning to express emotion more vividly through her music. Her small apartment became a workshop for creativity, a space where she could combine lessons with her own imagination to create something uniquely her own. Her mother continued to support her, attending lessons when possible, helping her practice, and reminding her to balance life and music. She never pressured her daughter for more than she could handle, but encouraged her to embrace every opportunity. The bond between them deepened, rooted in love, sacrifice, and shared dreams. Every day, the girl's confidence grew, and so did her vision for the future. She no longer imagined herself playing only in her neighborhood. She dreamed of concert halls, music festivals, and stages where her music could reach countless people. Despite her growing fame, the girl remained grounded. She remembered the broken piano, the quiet nights of practice, and the small apartment that had been her first stage. Those memories kept her focused and humble, reminding her that talent alone was not enough. It was determination, passion, and love for music that mattered most. She continued to help her mother, attend school, and engage with her community, always carrying a sense of gratitude for the journey she was on. Her story began to inspire others. Young children in her neighborhood started exploring their own interests, encouraged by the example she had set. Local residents would stop by to hear her play or offer support and encouragement. Teachers noticed the confidence and maturity she displayed, and other musicians in the community spoke of her potential with admiration. She had become not only a talented musician but also a symbol of hope, perseverance, and the power of dedication. One afternoon, as she was practicing a particularly difficult piece, she paused and looked around her small apartment. The familiar sights, the worn carpet, the stacks of sheet music, the corner where her mother worked tirelessly, reminded her of where she had started. She smiled, feeling a mix of pride and humility. She knew that music was not just about skill or recognition. It was about the journey, the effort, and the emotion behind every note. And she was only just beginning to understand the true impact her music could have. The girl's life continued to evolve, filled with lessons, performances, and new experiences. Each day brought challenges and opportunities, but she faced them with the same passion and determination that had driven her from the beginning. Music was no longer a secret, a private escape, or a hobby. It had become her voice, her purpose, and her connection to the world. She had discovered that true talent was not measured by recognition alone, but by the ability to touch hearts and inspire others. Her mother watched proudly as her daughter's journey unfolded. She remembered the long nights, the sacrifices, and the countless hours of practice, and she realized that every struggle had been worth it. The girl had taken a path that was not easy, yet she had embraced it fully, turning challenges into opportunities and dreams into reality. The love, guidance, and unwavering support of her family had helped her reach this point, and together, they celebrated every small victory along the way. As the girl prepared for her next performance, she felt a sense of calm and focus. She knew that every note she played, every piece she composed, carried a part of her story. The lessons she had learned, the emotions she had experienced, and the people who had supported her were all woven into her music. She had become more than a talented musician. She had become a storyteller, a source of inspiration, and a reminder that determination and passion could overcome even the most challenging circumstances. In her heart, she carried the knowledge that her journey was far from over. There would be more performances, more lessons, and more challenges to face. But she also knew that she had already achieved something extraordinary. She had discovered her voice, touched the hearts of those who listened, and begun a journey that could take her farther than she had ever imagined. And with every note, every melody, and every performance, she moved closer to fulfilling the promise she had made to herself long ago, to share her music, her heart, and her dreams with the world. The girl's journey had reached a point she had once only dreamed of. Invitations to perform had become more frequent, each one an opportunity to challenge herself and share her music with a wider audience. She was still the same girl who had spent long nights practicing in a small apartment, but now she carried the confidence of experience and the quiet knowledge that her talent was recognized and valued. Her mother continued to support her, proud and protective, always reminding her to stay humble and focused. One bright morning, she received news of a major opportunity, an invitation to perform at a prestigious music hall where famous musicians often played. Her heart raced with excitement and fear. This was the kind of stage she had once imagined only in her dreams. She spent the next days preparing meticulously, practicing her pieces over and over, refining every note, and imagining how it would feel to perform in front of a large, distinguished audience. On the day of the performance, she arrived early, her small bag filled with sheet music and notes. The hall was enormous compared to anything she had seen before. Rows of polished seats stretched into the distance, the ceiling high with elegant chandeliers casting warm light across the room. She could hear the faint murmur of the audience arriving, the tuning of instruments, and the quiet preparations that signaled the importance of the event. Her fingers tingled with anticipation, and her mind replayed every moment of practice that had led to this day. When she stepped onto the stage, the lights were dazzling, the audience hushed, and the weight of the moment pressed down on her. She took a deep breath, remembering all the small moments that had brought her here. The broken piano in the alley, the quiet apartment, the notebooks filled with melodies, and the encouragement from her mother. She sat at the grand piano, its polished surface gleaming, and let her fingers hover above the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes, feeling the music inside her before it left her fingers. The first note rang out soft and deliberate. Then the melody began to flow, stronger and more confident. Her fingers moved with precision, yet each note carried emotion, telling a story without words. The audience leaned in, captivated, their faces showing awe and admiration. She could feel the energy of the room, the connection between her music and the listeners. For a while, she forgot everything else, the stage, the lights, the audience, and became one with the music itself. Legends in the audience, musicians she had admired from afar, watched in astonishment. Some leaned forward, eyes wide, others whispered quietly to each other, unable to conceal their admiration. They had seen talent before, but there was something extraordinary about the way this young girl played. Her music was not just technically skilled. It was full of heart, passion, and authenticity. Each note carried a piece of her story, a reflection of the struggles, hopes, and dreams that had shaped her life. As she played, she thought of the streets she had walked, the small apartment that had been her home, and the mother who had sacrificed so much to support her dreams. Every chord, every rhythm, was a tribute to those who had helped her along the way. She imagined them in the audience, smiling, proud, and inspired. Her heart swelled with emotion, and it was this feeling that gave her performance its power, moving not only the audience but herself as well. When the final note lingered and then faded into silence, the audience erupted in applause. The sound was overwhelming, echoing throughout the hall, and she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Her mother, sitting in the front row, wept openly, her hands clapping furiously, pride shining on her face. The girl stood and bowed, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and humility. She had done it. She had shared her music on the stage she had dreamed of, and the world had responded. After the performance, several legendary musicians approached her. They spoke with admiration, offering words of guidance, encouragement, and even opportunities to study with them. One violinist said, "Your music is rare and precious. Keep nurturing it, and it will take you far." Another musician nodded, adding, "Your heart shines through every note. That is what makes you exceptional." The girl listened carefully, absorbing their wisdom and feeling a renewed determination to continue her journey, knowing that her path was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, she began to travel to other cities for performances and workshops. She learned new techniques, explored different styles, and met musicians who challenged and inspired her. Each experience expanded her understanding of music and strengthened her connection to it. Despite the growing recognition and travel, she remained grounded, never forgetting the small apartment, the broken piano, and the mother who had worked tirelessly to help her reach this point. She continued to write her own music, drawing inspiration from every experience, every place she visited, and every person she met. Her compositions became more complex, full of depth and emotion, yet always true to herself. She realized that music was not just about performing or recognition. It was about expressing feelings, telling stories, and connecting with others. She wanted every piece she wrote to resonate with someone, to inspire them, or to comfort them in ways words could not. Her story began to touch the lives of many. Children in her hometown looked up to her, inspired to explore their own passions. Musicians spoke of her as a rising star, while teachers and parents admired her dedication and humility. She had become a symbol of hope, perseverance, and the power of following one's dreams. Yet, she remained humble, understanding that her journey was ongoing and that true growth required continued effort, patience, and dedication. One quiet evening, she returned to her apartment, sitting at the small corner of her room where she had first begun to practice. She picked up her notebook and read through the earliest melodies she had written. They were simple, raw, and imperfect, yet full of heart. She smiled, remembering the long nights of practice, the small victories, and the challenges she had overcome. Those early compositions were a reminder of where she had started and how far she had come. She played one of the old melodies, letting it fill the room. It sounded different now, richer and more confident, but it still carried the spirit of the girl who had discovered her love for music in a small apartment, with a broken piano and a heart full of dreams. Her mother watched quietly, a soft smile on her face, proud of the young woman her daughter was becoming. The room was filled with the gentle sounds of the piano, a quiet celebration of growth, perseverance, and the beauty of following one's heart. The girl knew that her journey would continue, filled with more performances, lessons, and challenges. She also knew that the music she created had the power to reach beyond stages, beyond cities, and beyond her own imagination. She had learned that talent was important, but passion, perseverance, and authenticity were what truly made a musician remarkable. Every note she played carried her story, every melody was a piece of her soul, and every performance was a bridge connecting her to the hearts of others. In time, she continued to grow, performing in larger venues, collaborating with renowned musicians, and sharing her music with audiences around the world. She remained deeply connected to her roots, always remembering the struggles, the small apartment, and the sacrifices that had shaped her journey. Her story inspired many, proving that with determination, passion, and love, one could rise above humble beginnings and touch the lives of countless people. The girl, now a young woman, often reflected on her journey. From a small child playing on a broken piano in a modest apartment to performing on grand stages before legends and audiences, she had grown in skill, confidence, and heart. She understood that her music was not just a talent, but a responsibility, a way to inspire, heal, and connect with others. Each note she played was a reminder of where she had come from and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Her mother remained her greatest supporter, her presence a constant reminder of love, sacrifice, and encouragement. Together, they celebrated every success, every milestone, and every performance. The bond between them had grown stronger through shared struggles, dreams, and the language of music. And even as the girl continued to rise, she remained grounded, humble, and dedicated to the craft that had given her life purpose. In the end, her journey was more than music. It was a story of hope, resilience, and the power of following one's dreams. The little girl who had once practiced on a broken piano, filled with curiosity and determination, had grown into a musician who could move hearts, inspire minds, and remind the world that talent and perseverance could create extraordinary possibilities. And with every note she played, she honored the past, embraced the present, and looked forward to a future full of music, joy, and endless opportunity.